question here is, if China does indeed impose tariffs on the EU, what kind of impact will it have? And is it going to hurt China as well? For the answer, possibly I spoke to Daniel Lacalle. He's a professor of global economics of IE Business School in Madrid. Here's what he said. All right, Daniel, thank you so much for joining me here again. So let's talk about this. China opening an anti-dumping investigation into imported pork. Mainly, I see that it's targeted at Spain, where you are based. I mean, let's just start from the beginning here. Are we seeing the beginnings of a trade war?
I think that we are seeing the continuation of a trade war. Since the Trump administration passed on to the Biden administration, the so-called trade war has not stopped, has actually accelerated. And in the European Union, the trade war is disguised under environmental protection measures. So tariffs, trade barriers, etc. I think that what we have seen is that considering that the European Union feels that there is a threat to the European electric vehicle industry coming from very affordable, certainly much cheaper than European electric vehicles manufactured in China, they have implemented this 38% tariff on electric vehicles. And obviously, there's immediately some type of retaliation from China, which ends up hurting Spain, as you very well said right now, because it's on imported pork. So Spain is not going to benefit in any shape or form from the protectionism on electric vehicles, and is going to be hurt on the pork side. This is the problem of protectionism. Ultimately, the problem of the German, French automotive industry, in the case of electric vehicles, in the in competition in the electric vehicle arena, is not one of lack of entrepreneurial competitiveness. Is the enormous level of bureaucracy, taxes, burdens on business, etc., that the automotive industry suffers. So it's not that the European manufacturers cannot compete against China, is that they cannot compete against China with all of the regulations and burdens of the European Union. So resorting to tariffs doesn't make the European Union more competitive, but makes electric vehicle prices more expensive, and therefore the transition to cleaner transportation also more challenging.
Okay, so far this is an investigation, but it wouldn't be surprising that by the end of it, China, that is, imposes some sort of tariff on the pork. I mean, do you think this is going to have? And you talked about this as well, but maybe just elaborate a little bit. Is there going to be a material impact on Spain and whatever other countries that this measure is targeting?
Absolutely, it will. Yes. We are seeing it already. The slow, gradual, but relentless increase in protectionist measures that we have seen globally since 2008 slow down growth, reduce competitiveness, make inflation harder on the least privileged people, because the inflationist impact of protectionism is significant, particularly for the poorest. No, so it certainly has an impact. Governments will always say that the reduction in growth estimates, that the fact that the euro area is in stagnation has nothing to do with all of that. But anyone that looks at it knows that increasing barriers to trade, increasing protectionism, increasing taxes, putting unnecessary regulatory burdens, all of those factors certainly hurt the economies. And you mentioned what will be the impact on Spain, Italy, Greece, Portugal. Obviously, those are economies that are not able to accept the luxury of trade barriers like, for example, I don't know, France or Germany may. I don't think that they can either because they're not growing. But for the economies that are still on the process of converging to the average of the large European Union economies, that is certainly a burden. And for Spain in particular, which has sort of endured the past years of rising taxes, rising regulatory burdens, rising political uncertainty, and managed to come out of that end a little bit better thanks to exports, that is a very, very dangerous impact, and it certainly is a negative.
And just one more question on this topic, and let's focus this question on China, its side here. Is this a double-edged sword, I wonder? Can you talk about that, imposing potentially pork import tariffs here? Is that going to hurt China as well?
Protectionism, no, any protectionist measure is negative on the country that imposes them. So it's bad for the European Union and it's bad for China. It's bad for both. The trade barriers and trade wars are always negative for the country that imposes those barriers. So think about this. If you look at the imports of pork and the consumption of pork in China, it's an absolutely integral part of the Chinese diet. In many cases, I have read even studies saying that the abrupt increase in pork prices in 2020, 2021 was an essential part of the slowdown of the Chinese economy. So placing trade barriers on pork imports and placing tariffs on pork imports is going to increase prices in China. So it's negative for China. It's negative for the European Union. Protectionism never protects any of the economies. It's such a negative process, because if you think about it as well, the European Union puts a trade barrier. Then China puts another trade barrier that hurts both China and the European Union. Then the European Union puts another trade barrier that hurts both. And what you basically see as those things happen is that the path of GDP growth, the path of competitiveness, the path of productivity, the path of real wage growth, etc., all of those are hurt in the process. Those are very, very damaging for the Chinese economy as well.
So, Daniel, I do see you talking a little bit about China on social media, and I think you can speak to this as well, and it is big news today. So China's new home prices falling at the fastest pace in nearly 10 years. Can you talk a little bit about that? What options do Chinese officials have at the moment?
Well, I think that it's going to be very, very difficult for them to accept it. But Chinese officials need to understand that they have only one way of addressing the largest real estate bubble in recent history. It's larger than the real estate bubble of Sweden, of Spain, of the United States, of the UK in relative terms. So the burst of the real estate bubble in China needs to see deflation in prices. There is only one way in which you can deal with it, which is by actually making homes significantly more affordable for Chinese citizens in order to absorb part of that excess of building, which has been absolutely staggering. Now, if Chinese officials, in order to combat deflation, decide to implement measures to keep prices elevated or unaffordable for the majority of people, then two things happen. And we have seen it in Spain, we have seen it in Sweden, we have seen it in Iceland. Two things happen. One is that the excess of supply of homes is not reduced. Second is that the economy enters into weakness regardless. So there's only one way in which you can deal with a real estate bubble burst, which is by accepting that the prices of homes as they were being put to the market was completely different and significantly higher than what the reality would accept. And if they try to bring home prices up, that is not going to work. It never works. The only way in which you deal with it is the way that the United States, you will need foreclosures, you will need to see write-offs of real estate portfolios in the banking sector. All of those things need to happen. So you need to have, let's say, the reckoning moment of lower home prices, and then maybe you start to recover.
Okay, so I think the fear here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that because real estate for China is a big contributor to economic growth, to GDP, so I mean, I guess officials don't really want prices to come down because of that factor, but you're saying that China is likely to see economic slowdown anyways. So yeah. Why do you say that?
Well, because it's inevitable. We have seen so many real estate bubbles in so many countries that we now have enough information to understand that that bloating GDP with a real estate bubble creates very significant imbalances that always come back to bite. No, so. If I was a Chinese official, I would look at things from a glass half full way, which would be, hey, look, yes, we have this massive problem in the real estate sector, but the economy is still going to grow 4%. If they look at it from the perspective, we don't want prices to come down, we want prices to stay where they are and continue to build as much as we did in order to continue to have the level of GDP growth that the provinces demand, etc., then you don't solve the real estate bubble, and you don't get the benefits that could make more people access a home. So there's, a real estate bubble is no government wants to acknowledge a real estate bubble because it makes it. It shows that the policy implemented to maintain GDP or to increase GDP or to get more tax revenues with rising home prices failed. Okay, fair enough. But if you think about it from the perspective of the real economy, they should see that there is no positive way in which you can absorb the negatives of a real estate challenge if you don't allow the market prices to adjust to reality.
So let me just ask one more question here, Daniel. If Chinese officials follow down the path that you have suggested, there could be some potentially serious, maybe economic pain in the near term.
Absolutely. There is no other way to address a real estate challenge of this magnitude. In no economy, there are no measures that can be taken to address such an important real estate challenge after such a large increase in imbalances in the housing sector. It's a day of reckoning. It's happened in Sweden, it's happened in the UK, it happened in the United States, it happened in so many economies. Absolutely, there will be economic pain, but the way to look at it is that, this is the most important part, is that there is no other way to address it. There is no other. If you try to keep home prices at a level that is unjustified to economic reality, you don't address the problem of the real estate sector, and the economy suffers anyhow.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight today, Daniel.
Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel, like my videos, leave your comments below, and keep defending freedom. Thank you very much.